face become as perfect as a celebrity's. My sister was born with a bloated body, sallow skin, and constant freckles and pimples. But ever since she used the Youthful Maiden Shampoo and transformed into a fairy, the matchmakers in the village have been knocking down our door. Little does she know, she shouldn't touch this thing, or else she'll face a grim fate. On the 15th of every month, my mother has to prepare shampoo for my sister again. She dragged me into the kitchen, took out a knife, and stuffed a cloth into my mouth. Stinky girl, I have to endure the pain later. My mother cut a piece of meat from me with a knife. Despite my pain, she was pleasantly surprised to grind the meat into mud, pour it into the pot, and roll it in the shampoo she was boiling. Not for a moment. The bright red meat foam flipped up and down in the pot, and a sweet and greasy fragrance came out of the pot. She smiled happily, dragged me to guard the pot, and called my sister again. My sister ran in with a fat and bloated figure. She leaned in front of the pot, her fat lips fluttering, and asked irritably, "Mom, how long will it take to recover?" "One more night, don't worry, let the guard first." My mother comforted her twice. He threw me another bowl of bad rice, and went to eat happily with my sister. I covered my wound and devoured the bad food. From the time I was 10, my mother used a piece of my meat every month to make shampoo for my sister. After washing with this shampoo, it can maintain my sister's hair for a month. After a month, her hair will look the same again, followed by a bloated body, sallow skin, and constant freckles and acne. But as long as she washed it once, her body and face would become superior and perfect again. Because of this, my sister received a lot of eager attention from the men in the village. The threshold of media at home has been stepped countless times. My sister is read every day, looking forward to the day of marriage. But what she didn't know was that it was all a conspiracy by my parents. All they wanted was her life. In the morning, I took out the brewed shampoo. A large bucket of sticky scarlet liquid, huge bubbles rolling on the liquid, and the sweet and strange fragrance spread all over the yard. My sister couldn't wait to shove her whole head into the bucket, rubbing her hands up and down excitedly. I looked into the barrel. As usual, the scarlet liquid in the bucket became less and clearer at an extremely fast rate. My sister's yellow and split-ended hair became soft and smooth. His fat body was also changing. My parents rubbed their hands excitedly. "Oh, our family is going to be beautiful again, ha ha ha." After half an hour, my sister looked up. Her sallow and rough skin was now smooth and delicate, and her fat and bloated body was also slender and slender. She has become the flawless muse again. My parents came up excitedly and praised them again and again. There was a lot of thick black fat scattered on the ground, all of which had just fallen off my sister's body, and the sweet and greasy smell on my sister's body is even more intense. I stood aside in silence. My sister rolled her eyes in disdain and muttered loudly, "Mom, what are you doing with this medicine? Hurry up and boil water for me to take a bath." My mother wielded a broom and slapped me, ******************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************************* before, since that day has passed. My sister seems to be more beautiful, her waist is thinner and her skin is whiter. She is almost an adult, and she is getting more and more beautiful every day. People with boys of the same age come to my house every day to inquire. My mother has received a lot of red envelope gifts these days, and her face is red all day long. My sister was overjoyed too, looking at the room full of gifts. I'm also looking forward to marrying a good family. This day, I was pulling weeds on the courtyard wall. I happened to see my parents together and wondered what they were thinking about. My mother held a transparent glass in her hand, and there was very little yellow and greasy liquid at the bottom. There wasn't much liquid, but the fragrance was exceptionally rich. Sweet, rich fragrance. My nose spirit can also smell a little acid. I smelled it, and I felt that my whole body was smooth, as if it was the fragrance of a girl. I saw my mother's eyes flushed red and said anxiously, "These fake things mixed with goods are almost sold out. Take advantage of Zinza's adulthood in half a month and make new ones immediately. Otherwise, these goods will be sold out, but they will be exposed." My dad said, "Yes, these goods are enough for half a month." Don't look for a new boss. Just sell them for a few days, and make sure they don't reveal their secrets. When Zinzi comes of age, we can still sell it well for 2 or 3 years. Why worry about eating and drinking? After saying that, my dad took the can and went out the door. He didn't come back until evening. When he came back, he also brought 2 pieces of meat, a bag of sugar, and a bag of rice. My mother and sister greeted him happily and sat him down. As soon as I sat down, my father took out a stack of red tickets from his pocket and threw them on the table. Beautiful. Today I earned 1,000 for nothing. Beautiful. My mother was overjoyed and put both pieces of pork into the pot. The family sits at the table. They eat meat, I eat potatoes. My parents never gave me meat. I was born fat. Vegetarian. Drinking water is fat, grow meat fast. My mother cut off every month. That piece of meat will soon grow back. My mother said that I am a natural medicine inducer, and I can gain weight without eating meat, so why should I eat meat? Today, it seems that the money is sold, and my parents' attitude towards my sister is even more attentive. Pickled vegetables and rice, my sister eat big melon round. After a full meal, my mother grabbed my sister and applied some of the shampoo left over from last time. My mother said that if this thing is applied to the body, it can maintain the fragrance of a woman's body. My sister believed it, and from that day on, she insisted on applying shampoo, and her body was salted by that thing. She walked on the road, and from a distance, she could smell the fragrance on her body. Because of this, the men in the village were even more crazy about her. That smell was like a man's aphrodisiac. As time went by, my father went out very frequently every day, and every time he came home in the middle of the night. My mother, too, fiddles with things in the kitchen every day. My sister asked them, and they said they were preparing for my sister to get married when she was an adult. My sister got the answer, her cheeks flushed, and she believed it. But only I know that my parents are not preparing to marry my sister, but to send my sister to the West. There are still 7 days until my sister becomes an adult. Before the 15th day of every month, my mother began to make shampoo again, and usually, instead of using only a small piece of meat, this time she held a sharp knife and bound my limbs. He shaved my leg meat clean, grated it and threw it into the pot. I shook my body and didn't dare to scream. This time, the fragrance coming out of the pot was even more intense. That fragrance almost condensed into a solid entity in the small kitchen, desperately burrowing into my nose. My stomach was churning like crazy, almost vomiting. My dad got in and squatted in front of the pot with excitement, and the 2 of them stirred the pot frantically with a spoon handle. I also added a few things to the pot. The sweet fragrance almost spread throughout the small courtyard. My mom wants to wash my sister's hair again. This time, my sister frowned, a little unhappy. She said, "Mom, I haven't become a yellow-faced woman yet. Why do I have to wash my hair again? I'm so annoying, I don't want to wash it." In the past, my mother was accustomed to her petty temper, but this time, my mother couldn't tell, so she forcefully pressed my sister's head into the bucket. My dad said bitterly, "Zinzi, sometimes I look for my own reasons. I have been washing like this for so many years. What's there to be unhappy about?" My sister's head floated in the bucket. When it was fished out, the hair was as smooth as the best satin in the world, silky and elegant, with distinct roots. Even the small flaws on his face were gone, and his whole face looked like a shelled egg. The fragrance on his body became intense. My parents were overjoyed and touched my sister again and again. My mother smiled and said, "This skin, this meat, you see, it's a natural good material. It's beautiful, it's beautiful." My dad's green bean eyes kept spinning on my sister. "No, yes, natural beauty embryo is not like Araya, a useless waste." At this point, my dad glared at me and gave me a slap. I hung my head in silence, which happens from time to time, and I almost stopped feeling the pain. For several days, my mother had to make this shampoo every day. She needs more and more meat. I can't grow so much meat in a day, so she buys me a lot of boar meat that is not available in the market. This kind of meat is stinky, but it is very cheap. You can buy a large piece for $10. My mother cooked it casually and put it in my mouth. But who would want to eat this kind of meat? I didn't want to, so my mom opened my mouth and didn't give up until I swallowed it all. After eating meat, I naturally grow meat faster. The meat that was cut the day before can grow back early this morning. My mother happily stuffed a piece of rotten cloth into my mouth. The knife fell, and another large piece of meat fell to the ground. On this day, the fire in the big boiler never went out. The strange sweet aroma never dissipated. The days of my sister's adulthood are getting closer and closer. My sister is not going out, quietly waiting for my parents to marry her. She was lying in bed, and I had to bring her food. The strong fragrance in the room became more and more intense. I saw my sister's exposed skin, white and glowing, and her hair was spread out like seaweed, as beautiful as a fairy on TV. My sister has been favored all year round, and naturally she has been riding on my head for a long time. She looked at me and boasted, "Araya, you ugly hoof, which scruffy man dares to marry you?" It's not like me. All the men in the village are eager to kneel at my feet and ask me to marry him. In 2 days, my parents will marry me to the son of the village chief. His family is so rich, and I will live a good life in the future. You died early, and it is really embarrassing to have a disgusting sister like you. My sister's eyes sparkled with a bright glow and pride. I felt extremely calm. She secretly told her parents' plans. I think so. As her good sister, I should let my sister know how she died. My sister frowned and slapped me hard. Stinky hoof, you are so brave, you dare to provoke my relationship with my parents. I know she doesn't believe it. After all, her parents loved her so much. From childhood to adulthood, they usually had something to eat and wear at home, so they immediately clung to her and pampered her with arrogance and arrogance. I said, "Sister, don't you realize that this is the purpose of your parents? The more brainless you are, the more your parents will spoil you. They can only control you if you don't think or think." My sister's eyes were startled, and she didn't speak for a long time. Putting down the bowl and chopsticks, I turned to leave. My sister has reached adulthood. She happily put on her new clothes, put on makeup, and was beautifully dressed. My dad was busy, but my mom stayed in the kitchen and never came out. I swept the floor and looked at my sister from a distance. He sighed and sighed. My sister probably didn't listen to me. In the evening, my parents carried out a huge boiler, hot air billowing, a thick mellow fragrance spread out. My mother asked me to call my sister over. I searched left and right, but I didn't see where my sister was. Unable to find anyone, her parents were also anxious. The house turned upside down, but I still didn't see my sister. My sister escaped. She must have believed what I said that day. Today, she pretended to be calm to make my parents relax their vigilance so that she could have a chance to escape. Mom and Dad went crazy, seeing that things were about to happen, but my sister ran away, and no one could accept it. My father called the village chief, and said that if anyone could find my sister, he would give that person 500 yuan. For 500 yuan, you can buy a lot of things in our small county. Every household in the village was dispatched, and finally Aunt Shu at the end of the village found my sister in the ravine. She was covered in mud, and when she saw my parents, she was terrified. She asked Aunt Shu for help, but Aunt Shu took the money from my dad's hand with a smile, and pushed her towards my dad. My sister was carried into the house. In the midst of my sister's wailing, my mother shoved a piece of rotten cloth into her mouth. When has my sister ever been treated like this, abusing and screaming incessantly? My dad didn't say anything, and slapped my sister hard. "Stinky girl," I really asterisk. "I've spoiled you for so many years, it's time to be out point for the family." My mom picked up the steel brush and scrubbed it back and forth on my sister. It wasn't until the skin on her body became very red and thin that my mother stopped. My parents carried my sister, and were about to throw her into a hot boiler. My sister kept struggling with her hands and feet. She was like a red-hot chicken, about to be put into the pot. She kept screaming and cursing in her mouth, and the content of motherhood was extremely high. My dad slapped her again. She quieted down. In the end, she was thrown into the big boiler, her body floating and sinking with the hot water. I saw my sister sink into that pot of black soup. His eyes were filled with resentment. The soup boiled for 3 days and 3 nights. The sweet aroma from the pot could be smelled almost throughout the village. The villagers were curious, and they all lay in the corner of my house and asked, "Hey, Araya, what's the stuff stewed in this big boiler in your house?" The fragrance is confused. The whole village smells that smell. What's the stew? Is it meat? I want to eat it. I drove the chickens in silence. My mother was afraid that I would talk nonsense, so she sewed my mouth up after that day. I looked up, and the villagers saw my mouth. He cried out in horror. Oh, God's condemnation, Araya's mouth is sewn so tightly. Which one was condemned by God? Someone knew about my family's situation and interjected, who else but her parents? It is said that Chen Dazuang and his wife only spoiled Da Ya, but her Yao is tortured to death. Speaking of which, the villagers suddenly reacted. By the way, what about Da Ya? I haven't seen her for several days. A heated discussion suddenly came from the corner of my house. The sound grew louder, and my parents ran out. My dad used the pole to drive away all the spectators. I asterisk, aren't you mangy dogs stalking me? My family can't stand it. Go back to my mother's house to hide for a while, and do your hair. My mother was cursing and spitting. After everyone dispersed, my parents got together again. My father glanced at me, and seemed hesitant to say the following. My mom slapped him on the head. My mouth is sewn shut. I'm afraid she will do something. My father put his heart in his stomach, and said, well, Boss Wu called me today, and said that she introduced a few friends to let us supply for a long time. I'm afraid that only Zinzi and these goods are not enough. My mother cut her mouth, and glanced at me. What are you afraid of? If it's not enough, it's not that I can't do it. Let's sell this batch of goods first. After discussing, the two of them started to rumble in the boiler again. After a while, my mother brought out a basin full of shampoo. She and her father worked together to pour the shampoo into a transparent glass jar. The shampoo was yellow and sticky, and there was a faint hint of blood floating in it, and the fragrance was pungent. A few unboiled bones were stuffed inside, and there was a strange beauty. As soon as it was done, someone came to find it.